Do you want to increase your score on the English section of the ACT? Welcome to my new series where I've compiled my resources that I've used over the years to tutor multiple students to help them increase their subscores on the English section of the ACT. Welcome to Lesson 4. All my lessons build on one another, so make sure you've participated in Lessons 1 through 3 before watching this one. Some of the rules and topics that will be addressed in this practice test section include punctuation, joining clauses, using conjunctions, and more advanced subject-verb agreement. Let's get started. Since primitive times, societies have created and told legends. Created, comma, and told. Is that correct, or should we replace the underlined portion with B, created, then subsequently told, C, created and told, or D, created, comma, and told, original? Let's rule out choice B as it is redundant and too wordy. Choice D is redundant as well, because when you create something, it is already understood to be original. Now we just have to determine if the comma belongs there or not. Since and joins together are two verbs, created and told, a comma is not necessary, so choice C is the answer. Question 2. As we continue this passage, the next question proposes that we add a sentence before this sentence, indicated by the parentheses. The previous sentence from question 1 introduced legends and stories passed down from one to another verbally. This sentence says, these stories serve the dual purpose of entertaining audiences and transmitting values and beliefs from generation to generation. Question 2 asks, suppose that the author wants to insert a sentence here to describe the different kinds of oral stories told by these societies. Which of the following sentences would best serve that purpose? Here's the strategy I use to help me answer these types of questions accurately and quickly. As I read each choice, I write a word or two summarizing what the sentence does. For example, F says, these myths and tales varied in substance from the humorous to the heroic. I would summarize this sentence as different kinds since it tells about the varying kinds of stories. G says, these myths and tales were often recited by paid storytellers. I jotted down what this sentence says, that this sentence says how the stories were told. Choice H says, unfortunately, no recording of the original myths and tales exists. I put that this simply indicates if and how the stories lasted. And then for choice J, sometimes it took several evenings for the full story to be recited. Now, this explains how they were told in terms of time length. Now I read the question again and circle, underline, or highlight the main point. I need a sentence that describes the different kinds of stories told. So by glancing at my notes beside each choice, I can easily determine that only one sentence does that, choice F. F is the correct answer. So here's a tip. If you can, use summarizing to help you annotate the text, to help you remember what you read, to find the answer easily and quickly. Question 3. For this type of question, we need to determine two things. Which word should we use, and do we or do we not need a comma after that word? Indeed, however, or although. Which word contains the meaning appropriate for this sentence? Blank today, we have many more permanent ways of handing down our beliefs to future generations. We continue to create and tell legends. Look at these words. So choice D, although. When we use although, it carries a meaning similar to despite. Although today we have many more permanent ways of handing down our beliefs to future generations, comma, we continue to create and tell legends. Despite the fact that we can write and document, we continue to tell stories verbally. That is why D is the correct answer. Question 4. In our technological society, a new form of folktale has emerged, the urban legend. Should we replace the article the with any of these other choices? Let's review a punctuation rule to help us determine the correct answer. Notice the use of a colon right before the urban legend. A colon can be used to introduce an element or series of elements that illustrate or amplify the information that preceded the colon. For example, you would have gotten a perfect score on the ACT if it weren't for one subject, math. You've probably noticed commercials use this type of sentence by naming the thing or idea after a dramatic pause with a colon. It isolates it to give it attention and maybe even added dramatics. Therefore, the colon is used correctly, and I have the element, the urban legend, following it. F, no change, is the correct answer. Question 5. Urban legends are stories we have all heard. They are supposed to have really happened, but are never verifiable, however. Is that correct? No. We really do need a comma to separate the extra however from the rest of the sentence. Should we use however, furthermore, or should we end the sentence with a period after verifiable? If you watched lesson 1, you'd quickly determine that the best way to write this sentence is the shortest way. Choice D is the correct answer. Question 6. Again, I'll refer to lesson 1's video. That lesson was all about avoiding redundancy. Look at what is underlined: ending and conclusion. Urban legends have some characteristic features. They are often humorous in nature, with a surprise ending and a conclusion. An ending and conclusion are one and the same, and we don't need to use both terms. So to avoid being unnecessarily redundant, G, ending, is the correct answer. Question 7. Look at what is underlined. Loads it in. Choice B, loaded it in. C, is loading it in. Or choice D, had loaded it in. To decide which choice is correct, we need to look at the context and determine the verb tense as a whole. From the beginning, I note that the verbs that they used include was, killed, and knew. Those are all past tense verbs. This is a story taking place in the past, not in the present moment. So I can rule out choice A as loads it in is in the present tense. I can also rule out choice C is loading it in as well. Between choice B and D, what is the best answer? B, loaded it in. Question 8. As the hunter continued driving, the deer, he was only temporarily knocked unconscious by the car, woke up and began thrashing around. Remember that the rest of the verbs are past tense verbs, so the was verb is correct. Would we, in reference to the deer, say he was or which was? The correct answer is J, which was. As the hunter continued driving, the deer, which was only temporarily knocked unconscious by the car, woke up and began thrashing around. It sounded much better. Question 9 is all about punctuation. Do we need a comma, semicolon, period, or nothing between the words species and people? To determine this, we need to look at the entire sentence. According to the story, before alligators were a protected species, people vacationing in Florida purchased baby alligators to take home as souvenirs. Let's consider choice C. While placing a period and starting the sentence would work, people vacationing in Florida purchased baby alligators to take home as souvenirs. That is a complete sentence. However, by placing that period there after species, we would have an incomplete and incorrect sentence with, according to the story, before alligators were a protected species. C is incorrect. D is also incorrect because we do need punctuation there. Otherwise, it's a run-on. If B were correct, we would need both parts on either side of the semicolon to be independent clauses, meaning that they could stand as complete sentences alone. Now, for the ACT, you'll need to know how to use the semicolon correctly. Look at these two independent clauses. I am cold. I am leaving. They each contain a subject, a verb, and complete a thought. I can leave them as two separate sentences, or I could combine them into one sentence. And while doing this, you can do this in a couple different ways. One option is to simply use a semicolon. Always think of the semicolon as strong enough to join two independent clauses. Another way to put this in one sentence is to use a comma. However, a comma is not strong enough to do this job by itself. A comma must be accompanied by or with a conjunction. If you remember the acronym FANBOYS, each letter stands for one of the 7 conjunctions: for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. I am cold, comma, so I am leaving. It would be incorrect to use a comma alone here. However, you can use a comma alone to join a dependent clause with an independent clause. If this sentence had the word because added to the first clause, it is now a dependent clause because it cannot stand by itself as a complete thought or sentence. Because I am cold, comma, I am leaving. This is the kind of sentence right here. That is the correct answer from question 9. Everything I bolded is a dependent clause. Therefore, the correct answer is A, no change. Question 10. Here's the strategy I use to answer this type of question quickly. Look at the answer choices. I notice that choice J is omit the underlined portion. Let's consider that first before we waste valuable time reading the other lengthy answer choices. Also, consider the passage as a whole. Remember that it has been about different urban legends. Between 1930 and 1940, nearly 1 million alligators in Florida were killed for the value of their skin used to make expensive leather products such as boots and wallets. It goes on to go back to the story. It began telling about a legend involving pet baby alligators. I can already tell that the underlined sentence is completely off topic. J, omit, delete, get rid of this sentence. J is the correct answer. Question 11. One of the more popular stories are about a woman who was unwittingly charged $100 for a cookie recipe she requested at an upscale restaurant. If you rely on what sounds correct, you'd be wrong. First of all, if you watch lesson 1, you would correctly rule out choice B and D because they are unnecessarily wordy. So now we must decide if are about or is about is correct. Let's review subject-verb agreement. Singular subjects go with singular verbs, which often end in S. Remember, S for singular. Plural subjects go with plural verbs. He was tired, not he were tired. Stories is plural, are is plural, so would that be correct? No. Stories is not the subject. Stories is used as the last word in a prepositional phrase. I often tell my students to be careful and put prepositional phrases in parentheses to isolate the accurate subject of the sentence. Of the more popular stories is a prepositional phrase. Ignore it. The subject of this sentence is one. So is one plural or singular? One is singular. You wouldn't say one are about a woman. You would say one is about a woman. Therefore, choice C is correct. So be careful and look out for prepositional phrases that could fool you into choosing the incorrect answer. Remember, if you don't know how to find a prepositional phrase, the first word of it is always a preposition like of or to. Question 12. To get her money's worth, this woman copied the recipe. Woman supposed, woman supposedly, women supposedly, or women supposed to. F is wrong. Now notice G, it says woman, singular, while H says women, plural. We're talking about one woman, so G is correct. Question 13. Notice omit the underlined portion is choice D, so let's consider that first. Although today's technology enhances our ability to tell and retell urban legends, the internet can also serve as a monitor of urban legends. Dedicated to commonly told urban legends, research is done by many websites. According to these websites, most legends, including the ones told here, have no basis in reality. The reason I cannot rule out choice D is found in that last sentence. It says, according to those websites. By saying that, I need a preceding sentence that introduces these websites. So D is not the answer. Let's consider A, no change. The sentence already, I see a problem. It says research is done by many websites. Are the websites actually performing the research, or are the people? A is not the answer. So which is written in the best possible way, B or C? B. Many websites are dedicated to researching the validity of commonly told urban legends. This sentence is the best choice. And if you watch lesson 1, you'll remember it's not always about finding the correct answer, but the best answer. Question 14. This question is asking about the passage as a whole. Suppose that the author had been assigned to write an essay comparing the purposes and topics of myths and legends in primitive societies and in our modern society. Would this essay fulfill this assignment? I use a particular strategy when answering this type of question, which I introduced in a previous lesson. Notice F and G say yes, and H and J say no. When you read the question, stop and think before you read the answer choices. You need to answer this question yes or no for yourself. So if I stop and do that, I would say no. I say no because the passage really only gave examples of modern legends. Now, I might want to glance back at the passage as a whole, and the very first sentence does mention primitive times and how they told stories verbally. However, it didn't provide any examples. So the passage mentioned mainly modern urban legends. So now that I've determined that I would say no, I'm not going to waste valuable time, especially if I'm running out of time, reading the lengthy F and G choices. So I'm just going to get that out of my mind and only look at choice H and J. So I'm going to read those. H says no because the essay does not provide enough information about the topics of myths and legends in primitive societies to make a valid comparison. J says no because the essay doesn't provide any information on the myths and legends of primitive societies. Since I've already established that the passage does briefly mention primitive societies but doesn't go much further, H is the best answer.